speak before we find. We have Angela Palm with us tonight. She's from Georgia School Board Association. She's our legislative representative down at the Capitol whenever they're in session, and a lot of times when they're not. Angela is one of the few people that I truly trust. She is always, instead of giving me her opinion or her ideas, she told me what's been said, and to the best of her understanding of what she's been told, what it means. Good information's come from this lady, and Don Roots, he was in the position before her, and he was a world of information, still is. But she'll be speaking, and then Dr. Desper's going to come on and speak, ask Wendy to speak. So maybe there'll be a few more people come in. If they don't, it'll be a small, short party. So, but I want to pull my coat off because it's warm in here. I've got old and I have to wear these things now, and sometimes they get twisted in back, and if they are, just pay no attention. I don't have one in arm done twisting. But anyway, I'm going to sit down and let Angela come on and I'll talk to you.
Thank you all for coming. Feel free to move up in the back, but I'll talk about it. When you vote, if you have not voted already, you will find two constitutional amendments on the ballot. And amendment number 1 is related to schools. And the question we'll ask you, I do have a handout over here. You will see the question, and you're being asked if you want to amend the Constitution so that state or local boards can approve charter schools at the request of the community. They've added a preamble to it that tells you this is to improve student achievement. What they don't tell you is that local boards can approve charter schools. They have been able to since 1993. Georgia was the 3rd state in the nation to pass a charter school law. It's been amended several times to expand the kinds of schools that we can have. The state can approve charter schools. In 2000, a law was passed that said the state board can approve charter schools that have been denied locally. So it created an appeals process. Our current Constitution, since they're asking if you want to change it, it's important that you understand what it says today. Today, the Constitution says that each county will have an elected local board of education. An elected board will appoint a superintendent. And that elected board has control and management of the schools within its district, and it has the authority to establish schools. It further goes on to say that the state has the authority to approve special schools. So it gives the state a very limited authority to approve schools, and your elected officials a very broad authority. What this amendment does is change it so that it is clear in the Constitution that the special schools that the state is allowed to create include state charter schools. By making that change, it really eliminates the restriction on the state. So that instead of the state having a limited authority to approve schools and create schools, they would have basically the same broad authority that the elected local board does. Whenever there's a constitutional amendment, it takes, it's called enabling legislation, to show how that amendment would be implemented. The legislation has already been written, it's already passed the legislature, already been signed by the governor. That legislation says the way they're going to use the amendment, if it passes, is they will create a Charter Schools Commission, which existed in 2008 under a statute that they passed and that was struck down by the state Supreme Court. This commission will be appointed by the state board based on recommendations from the governor, lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House. And their sole purpose is to approve schools and to monitor those schools. So they are appointees of appointees. So what you're being asked to do is to amend the Constitution to broaden the state authority, We already know from the legislation they're planning to use that authority to create an additional body, the Charter Schools Commission. The statute gives this commission rulemaking authority, regulatory authority, the authority to hire their own staff, requires them to run their own website, gives them a whole list of duties. So they it would be in essence creating another agency and another bureaucracy. And it's hard to understand why we need that. Some people say they want the amendment because they need to make sure constitutionally they can do what they're doing now with the state board. But if that were true, they would have written this so that the state board itself was the one who was approving the charter schools, not creating a separate body. So it's not that. This has been a long, hard fight. I can tell you that most people in the legislature said, people who work in all areas, this was one of the dirtiest, longest fights they had seen under the Capitol. This campaign itself has been very difficult. All campaigns are. But there have been a lot of charges back and forth. And it's sad to see that because at the end of the day, November 7th, we're going to get up and we have to go back and work together to try to improve our schools. So what I want you to understand is what the amendment is, what the effect is. The other thing that comes up is funding. Because these are state schools, they do not get local money. But they get additional state money that local students do not get. I'm talking with your people here. I know that you have 180 days of instruction still for your kids here. And you pay your teachers for 10 professional development days. Do you know that only 1/3 of the school districts in this state still have 180 days of student instruction? Only 59 districts. Because of all the cuts that they've had in the state. Almost nobody still gets the 10 professional development days. There are just a handful of districts that have still been able to provide that. Class sizes are larger. Teachers have been furloughed. They have been laid off. They don't get some of the bonuses that they were promised for completing the national certification, for instance. Insurance costs have been skyrocketing. It's supposed to be working in the school district. You know this, I'm preaching to the choir. But there are a whole list of financial issues that have happened to the public school districts in this state. The state charter schools will be funded differently. They will get the basic, quality basic education, QBE money that every public school student gets. If their school chooses to provide transportation, and they don't have to, then they would get transportation money. If they choose to provide meal service, and they don't have to do that either if they don't want to, then they would get nutrition money. But then they get a supplemental grant. If it is a statewide virtual school, then they're getting $1,707 more per student, in addition to their QBE money. If it's a bricks and mortar, a physical school, then they're getting about $3,600 more per student, in addition to their QBE money. When they totaled it up for right now, for the existing state charter schools, there are 15 of them, and the students who are in those schools, it's going to cost the state $35 million for that supplemental grant. This year's budget only put in $8 million. So when they go back in January and start working on the supplemental budget, they have to find another $27 million just for the students in the existing state charter schools. If this commission is approved, if this amendment passes, and the commission goes into business, and they have it set up so they can be in business by March, they would end up taking petitions to open next fall. There will be an increasing number of the schools opening. State Superintendent Barge had the DOE staff look back at the number of schools that opened under the commission as it operated previously and extrapolated that to try to project some kind of cost. based on the number of schools they approved previously and the size of the schools that were approved previously, they're projecting that the total cost, QBE plus the supplemental grant, in 5 years would be $430 million. If you take out the QBE money, so we're just looking at the extra money, the supplemental grant, it's $109 million in 5 years. The commission did not approve a lot of schools. That's true. And people say that as if it's supposed to be okay, that it was somehow limited. People criticize local boards for turning down charter schools. The commission turned down more charter petitions in the 2 years it existed than local boards had. And they were turning down many of the same petitions that the local boards had turned down. But somehow, when the local boards turn them down, it's a terrible thing. They're being obstructions. They're just denying choice. But when the commission turned them down, or when the state board denies one, everybody says, oh, isn't that wonderful? They're quality authorizers. They're really working hard and looking at this to make sure they're viable. Even if it was the same thing the local board did. Fulton County did not renew a local charter school for Fulton Science Academy. Legislators, state leaders all over the place were condemning that local board. They applied to the state board to become a state charter school, and they were denied for exactly the same reasons by the state board that the local board had done, and not a single person from the state stood up and said, that board did the right thing. Instead, they just very quietly did it. The local boards are getting no support. Instead, they're being condemned for doing a good job. They have struggled hard in these financial times, and there is no end to it. When I tell you this is going to affect the local schools, it is because I've looked at the budget, because I have been in the legislature for 20 years looking at the budget and the way things work. The state budget's only so big. We're not going to start any new taxes. We're not going to create any kind of new revenue unless they start having more kinds of fees. So if we think that the state budget is only so big and it's not going to get any bigger unless just expansion of the economy, maybe 4% a year, 5%, we'd really like to see it back higher than that. But let's just be realistic about what's going on right now. When they go back in January, they do the supplemental budget, and they'll do the budget for the following year, just as they always do. When they go back, here are some of the things they're looking at. Already told you they got to find the $27 billion. That's small potatoes compared to the rest of the stuff they have to do. We owe $650 million to the federal government for the loan from the unemployment. We don't have to pay that back all at once, but we've got to pay it back. Medicaid, over $400 million hole. And that's not really due to Obamacare. That's before any of the new stuff really kicks in. That's really dealing with the fallout from the economy with more people qualifying. The hospital tax expires this year. They passed it 2 years ago. It was put into a package with the senior citizen income tax exemption so that it ended up being, they could say it was revenue neutral, so it wasn't a new tax. But it has a sunset. It's this year. Another $300 million if they don't renew that tax. And that's going to be a huge fight because nobody wants to renew a tax. None of them want to say that they're taxing anybody. So the only way they can do it is they package it with another cut. Well, if they package that revenue with a cut, then they haven't gone anywhere and they're still whole there someplace. There are numerous things that have to be done. And if we want the state to move forward, we've got to do more than tread water here. If we want this to be a state where we celebrate our natural resources, we have some beautiful places in the state. You have some right here. And we have to be willing to spend money on those. We have to be willing to spend money to maintain our state parks, to maintain the lakes and the rivers. All those things take money. So if the pie is this big, and the state has all these obligations, where will the money come from to fund these state charter schools? It has to come from the same education pie that we already have. Because there isn't more money from somewhere else for them to take, and they're going to take money from public safety. And they're going to take it from anywhere else. It has to come from there. in order to fund this. So if you vote for this, you have decided that you trust them with the education of the children at the state level. You have decided that it is necessary to create this new bureaucracy rather than decreasing government the way we have been doing in the last years. You have decided that the state will have the money to do all of this, apparently with no detriment to anybody. And if you vote no to all of that, then the power remains with the people. Local control is not the local board or any other city official. Local control is the voters. And it's the voters retaining the power to say, I elect people to represent me, that make decisions about our schools, and I want the decisions to lie with them. I do not want them to say no to something and then have an appointed bunch of people in Atlanta saying, yes, you are going to have that school, and putting the school in my community. Thank you. I'll take questions later.
I don't know what I can add to what Angela said. We'd like to welcome Fred Gould, who is with us tonight from Georgia Association of Educators. Fred, we'll give you an opportunity to fill in. We'll let you come in and join in. Well, I never have known Fred to be short on talking. I just want to give you a couple of local things. In the last 5 years, and I'm talking to you tonight as Ben, not as the school superintendent. I'm talking to you as Ben, somebody who is an advocate for public education. In the last 5 years here, we've cut 1 out of every 7 jobs in Pickens County school system. We're the largest employer in the county, and we have cut 108 positions in the last 5 years due to budget reductions. My board has done a wonderful job, and the boards in the past have done a wonderful job, just like Angela was saying. We're very rare. We're that school system that still goes 180 days, and we haven't laid off anybody, and we're still paying some of the benefits to our employees, some of the health care benefits to employees. There's a lot of school systems, as Angela said, 2/3 now are not even going a full school year, y'all. My wife works in Marteau County with the school system. She's furloughed 12 days this year. The principals and stuff have a 10-day permanent reduction on their contract in Bartow County. We've lost from the state in funding over the last 10 years $17.5 million in austerity reductions. It's money we'll never see again for your kids in dealing with what needs to be done in this county. I don't think when you're talking about putting another entity to deal with education in the state of Georgia, we need another bureaucracy. The estimates that I've been reading will be about $1 million a year just to run the bureaucracy. It's going to have to be associated with the charter school effort. Not all charter schools are bad. And there are procedures in place. We have a great one in our county right here, the Mountain Ed Center that helps kids graduate. I'm all for what they're doing at Mountain Ed because they work so well with us. But guys, we can't. The analogy is perfect. I love pizza. If somebody takes one of my pieces of pizza away or some of my pizza away, there's not going to be as much pizza going around for everybody else. And in public education, where we're drowning right now, I'm already working on next year's budget. Because I already know, before I go start talking to my board members, that I've got to come up with $1.5 million in new expenses next year for insurance. And the reason we're paying the insurance is we're trying to pay back the unemployment insurance. So the state has taken the support away from our workers. The issue is local control. It's what the voters say in Pickens County. You know, when you have a complaint in Pickens County, it's not hard to get a hold of Ben. It's not hard to get a hold of one of these board members. They're found very easily for complaints. If you have a bureaucracy in Atlanta that you have a question about that, how are you going to get a hold of that person or persons and hold that board accountable for their actions if they do something that is not in the local best interest of what's for children in this county? So, you know, those are some of the issues that really bother me. hope that you'll read the amendment carefully and ask others to read the amendment carefully. It's worded in such a way that it almost, well, my son said to me, Dad, that almost sounds, if you don't vote for that, you're voting against baseball, apple pie, and motherhood. It's a very creative wording of what is on the amendment. Please read it carefully, make an informed choice, talk to those that you work with, that you are dealing with on an everyday basis, because this may be the most critical thing that's happened in education in 33 years that I've been associated. I've known Fred for 33 of those years, and sometimes we sit on the same side of the table, and there's sometimes we sit across the table when Fred doesn't agree with me on something, but I still respect Fred, and I respect the fact that he's in it for education, he's in it for the children, and he's in it for the people that work for the children. Fred, add some comments, please. I'll pass those out for you if you like to.
I wasn't sure what to expect when I was coming over here, so I'm not as prepared as I might be or ought to be for a group like yours and a discussion like this. But let me introduce myself first, and you know, the only thing I would say relative to Ben's introduction is that from my vantage point is when Ben hasn't seen things the way that I see it, that we might be on opposite sides. But no, we've known each other, as I said, for 30 years, and we are very good friends, and I consider him one of my dear ones in public education. I work for the Georgia Association of Educators, the Teachers Association here in the state, the Educators Association here in the state, that represents folks throughout not only our state, but the nation as a whole, given the structure of our organization. I've done so for the last 30 years in this part of the state, as Ben pointed out. This has been my home. So I'm very familiar with the players, I'm very familiar with the people, I'm very familiar with public schools and the systems in this area, as they are with me. And this is one of those times when we all find ourselves on the same side of the table. School board members, those of you who are here tonight, superintendents that are here tonight, and organizations like ours. And the reason is very simple. This is not about public education in our state. This is about profiteering and money in the pockets of individual private corporations for the purpose of making a dollar. That's what this is about. Now, we can sit here and have a discussion about all the various esoterical arguments that we can come up with on both sides relative to this. And we can talk about how terrible the schools are in this specific little area of the state, in this one little community or this one little block where this terrible school exists. Or we can pick this wonderful charter school that's working so well somewhere in our state and say what a great example it is, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we had so many more of them that existed throughout our state that we could provide for. First of all, the terrible school example is 1 in a million. You tell me, who's going to raise their hand and say you got terrible schools in Pickens County? They're doing a terrible job educating the kids in Pickens County. It's not going to happen. Your community's not going to raise their hand and say that. You might like it to be better. You might like to see more. And I'm sure your board and your superintendent and your teachers would love to do more than what they are. But you're not going to say it's terrible. Because you know it's not terrible. You live here. You work with it. You're part of it. You're in the PTAs. You're involved in one way or another in your community and your school, and you know. It's somebody else's school that's terrible. That's the way this works. We're not going to talk about how bad it is here in Pickens. That's not the case. We're going to talk about how bad it is someplace else because we don't relate to that. That's somewhere else. And if it's bad over there, so be it. Yeah, we got to fix that for them. It'll never come to Pickens. I'm here to tell you it will come to Pickens if this passes. We talk about the great charter school. Those exist. But here's what's missing from that argument. And Ben touched on it, and I suspect you did too when you spoke earlier. I'm sorry I wasn't here to hear everything you had to say. I apologize. I was other places having discussions tonight. But that's one charter school. One charter school in one place somewhere that's doing a great job. We're not talking about all the others that are doing an average job, or not so average job, no better than an average job than the public schools of our state are doing right now. We don't highlight those because those don't help the argument on that side of the fence. We only talk about the ones that have to do with our argument. The one that's doing so well in South Georgia, or the one that's doing so well in the metro area, or the one that's doing so well wherever it might be. And we can all cherry pick. I can do it better than most because I know my area so well. You want me to pick the very best public schools in the state or the northwest part of the state? I can do it. I can take you to them and show you great things going on every day. The fact is, that's every school in my area. Because great things are going on every day in every one of them. Every one of them. Every day. So, set the greatness and the not-so-greatness aside. Why are we doing this? Did you discuss the funding formula? Your superintendent, and we're the board members. Do we have it here? And the board members, they get $3,000 a student. I picked the figure out of the sky. That's not real. Don't quote me on that if you're with the press. That is not the Pickens County funding formula. It's just a number I picked. It's because I can do math in simple form, and if it's nice round numbers, it helps me. Okay, $3,000. But not that state charter school if this passes. There's a difference between charter school and state charter school. Don't let the two things be confused, and don't let anybody confuse you or say differently. Your school system can start a charter school tomorrow. Gilmer County's talking about being a charter school system. The whole system. God bless them. And if their board sits down and the majority raise their hand and say that's what they want to do, go for it tomorrow. But that was a local board making a local decision for a local community, not somebody way off down in Atlanta making it for them. That's the difference in this. It's not against charter. Charter's good. State charter is bad. That's what we're saying here. But that $3,000 that Pickens County gets per child extrapolates out to $7,500 for a state charter school. I've done this 30 years. That math doesn't make sense to me. You just told me that my grandson, our grandson, my wife's back there, Liz, is not as important, is not worth as much going to school in Cobb County's public school system as somebody's child who might go to a gated community's state charter created public school. And that's not right. That is not right. It is not fair. And that is exactly what your state legislators and your governor is saying to the public education systems of this state. You're not worth, your children are not worth as much as these children are in this setting that's specially picked by 7 people that I appointed. That's what this amendment says. This amendment is a falsehood. I'm going to try and be like the vice presidential candidates and not use that L word, but it's a falsehood. It sits here and tells people who read it that if you don't vote for this, local school systems will not have the right to vote for charter schools or to appoint or select or elect to have charter schools. That is not true. I've just gotten done, I'm sure you got done saying, I thought I heard you get done saying, a local board can choose to have a charter school if it so chooses to want to do so. And it can be a charter school system if it so wants to do so, like White County is and like Gilmer County is talking about here. You don't need this amendment to pass for that to happen. But the legislators and the governor in their infinite wisdom chose to put that in there because you know why? If it just said state charter school, it was dead on arrival. It was dead on arrival if people read that and said, give the state the power to say charter schools? Well, we don't want to do that. We want that to be local. But if we slide in the word local, well, now we don't want to take that away from Mr. School Board member here. We don't want to take that away from Mr. Superintendent here. We definitely want them to have the right to be able to do that for our kids and our community. So to the average citizen in your community, it looks like we got to pass this in order to be able to afford our local board and superintendent the authority to be able to create charter schools at home. That's not true. I wish there was a way that you could take these folks to court when they write language like this for an amendment, so that they could be held accountable for the falsehoods. But unfortunately, both sides of the aisle have been guilty of doing this over the years when it comes to state amendments. And that's the last point I'm going to make, if it's okay, sir. Okay? I'll answer questions, I promise. I will not walk away without answering or being available to. Now I lost my track when you raised your hand.
Sorry.
Where was I? Last thing I was going to
Last
say.
thing you were going to say?
I lost my train of thought. I have no idea. If it comes to me, I will come back to it. Let me ask you a question then. While I'm trying to think where my track went to when you raised it.
So is it fair to summarize and say that state charter schools funnel money to big business and elite families?
Say again now.
Is it fair to summarize and say that state charter schools funnel money to big business and elite families?
It's fair to say that state charter schools will funnel state tax dollars to for-profit companies that will come into our state to make money on our children. Yes, that is fair to say. It is fair to say that not only because that is what exactly will happen, but because that's what's happened in Florida, and that's what's happened in Louisiana, and that's what's happened in Texas, and that's what's happened in Colorado, and that's what's happened in Wisconsin, and that's what's happened in Ohio. And I've left a few states out, but I'm covering that waterfront fairly comprehensively there. That's what's happened in all those places. And we're the first state, to my knowledge. Again, I qualify that, so if you take the last part, please take the first part. I qualify that I believe we're the first state where these same business people are coming in trying to change our state constitution. In these other states, they were laws. As a law, it's 50% one. So, okay, we pass it today, we don't like it tomorrow, we find that one or two people and we flip it the other way. That's how that works. But this is an amendment to our Constitution. It takes 2/3 of the House, it takes 2/3 of the Senate, and the governor's signature for it to get on the ballot. Then it takes a majority, simple majority. I wish it was 2/3. I'd be breathing a lot easier. But it's a simple majority of the electorate for it to pass. When you figure that it takes 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate for something of this nature to pass, think about the generations and the decades it would take to change the makeup of that House, to change the makeup of that Senate, in order to have enough new faces, to have enough people willing to say, yeah, we'll put this back on the ballot, and have a governor who's willing to then sign it so it'll go on the ballot. And then a public who's willing to overturn what they voted on all those decades before this amendment. They're not dumb. They know what they're doing. They understand that if this passes in this format, in this state, they will have broken ground that they can use in other states as a template for getting the same thing done to other state constitutions in order to codify their efforts to undermine public education in states throughout this country. Because it's not just Georgia. We're not being picked on alone. We're not in isolation. We're actually, they've gotten around to us. This is one time where we're not the first. We're sort of in the line. And we have an opportunity because of that to be able to look at what's happened before us and act upon that, rather than trying to be the one that says, well, it's, crying wolf or the chicken little, the sky is falling. No, we can look and say, this is what's happening in Florida. They've lost over $1 billion in the last 2 years of public education funding to the state charter schools in the state of Florida. Over $1 billion in the last year or two. That's criminal. Criminal. Now I know what that last thing was. You were asking about this company, you were asking about companies and coming in. One of the neat little loopholes that this will open up in our state, and is already being looked into in our state by foreign companies, investors, is the ability to utilize the state charter school program, as it has been in Florida, as it has been in other places that I've mentioned, to allow for foreign investors to build charter school, state charter school, I want to be clear on this, a state charter school in a given community with the blessing of the committee, the Commission of 5-7. And as a result of that, be able to circumvent our immigration laws and go straight to the top of the list to be allowed to come in without the green card, without all the requirements that go with being, if you will, the words we use in this day, a legal immigrant in our country. So while the average foreign individual who wants to come into our country and is patiently waiting in line, if I got enough money back here, $500,000 to $1 million, if I got that kind of money back here, I can move myself and my family to the front of the line and be able to go right into our country and right into our education system and right into a gated community state charter school away from the rest of the world. China is doing it. Russia is doing it. India is doing it. Middle Eastern corporations are doing it. They've all found this as a way, and South American corporations, by the way, I don't want to be guilty of leaving any groups out here. They've all found a way using what's known as EB-5, EB-5 in the immigration law as a way around what's required to become a citizen or a recognized immigrant, green carded immigrant in our country. Those are the kind of doors that are open with this. Those are the kind of issues that we'll be facing in our state if this passes.
Speak to the groups that are backing this. Are you familiar with ALEC?
Oh, groups that are backing this. I'm holding this and I'm thinking, okay, listen, we're backing it and Board of Associations backing it. The groups that are backing the actual amendment's passage, ALEC, the Alliance of Legislative something Council. Exchange Council, thank you. Is a group of businessmen and women throughout the country with a vested interest in getting certain legislation passed that is business friendly. And they have utilized a boilerplate mentality towards that legislation. One size fits all. Get the legislation written, get it passed someplace, use that language, use that boilerplate, every place else you can get it passed. State charter schools is an example of that. There are a number of for-profit companies that have come out in favor of this. Off the top of my head, I'm actually having a hard time with that because we don't have them in our area of the state. There are a few in the Atlanta area. There is one or two in the south part of the state, but we don't have for-profit charter schools as such in this part of the state. So as a result, I don't really have the interaction with them to be that familiar. But there are, let's see, I do believe there's one or two listed here.
Walmart, Johnson & Johnson.
Now, Walmart is not, as a company per se, you got to be a little careful, I think, because the company itself hasn't necessarily invested in the plan or in the effort as a company. But heiress to the Walmart fortune, she's now invested over $1 million in the state of Georgia. By the way, it started out with only $250,000, only $250,000. But it started out with $250,000. The last I read, which was yesterday, it's now over $1 million invested by her. So the stakes keep going up, and we could have bet on this, right? As we get closer to election day. For the life of me, I'm not seeing it then, but I thought it was listed in here, to be honest.
There are several for-profit companies that, you're right, they're not really in
the best way, if you wanted to really know who they are, you just simply go online and Google for-profit charter school company.
There's K-12E.
Okay.
K-12E runs Odyssey, one of the state virtual schools that currently exists. And they're in most states. They have Judy Heather's campaign. Charter Schools USA, I don't know if they contributed independently to the campaign. They have 2 of the state charter schools. They're in Florida, and there have been issues with them down there. Connections has one of the other state charter virtual schools, and they've contributed to it. Also pushing this in the state is the Georgia Chamber of Commerce.
It's internal.
100 Dads, American Federation for Children, Americans for Prosperity,
Green Dot. That's the one that I kept thinking of.
yeah, they're not in Georgia yet.
They're not, yeah, but but if you look at where they are and what they follow this legislation.
Right.
So we can conclude that they're hovering on the borders, waiting for this legislation to pass so that they can be here when the Commission 7 is appointed and bring their boiler template information or their boiler template charter to them for passage, which they will anticipate receiving because they've gotten in other places. Yeah.
I apologize, this question might have already been asked, but I had a 6:30 meeting, so I got here as quick as I could.
I did the same thing, and I apologize. Don't worry.
Well, actually, it's a 2-part question, but they're real quick. I have a neighbor 2 doors down that has a beautiful vote yes sign for this amendment. And I know that family has very close ties to a private school up there north of us in LJ. Is there a possibility that some of these private schools will benefit from charter money?
Well, I think if they went back and retooled who they were and what they were, and they built themselves a boilerplate or their own charter that they presented to the state commission for approval, yeah, they could. I mean, they could recreate themselves in the form of a state charter. So I don't think anything keeps that from happening. I don't think you can say, well, I'm sorry, you were a private school before this passed, and you can't be a state charter now. I think they could. Will there be a lot of that? Yeah, no, I don't think there'll be a lot, but there could be some. Yes,
so there's that possibility.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any way you could avoid it. I don't think you could draw a line and say no.
It's state money versus parents having to pay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think you have to. I don't think you could draw that line and that distinction. So.
And then my second question is, I see you have a beautiful sign right over here. I'd love to get access to one of those.
Well, I can assure you that they're waiting right outside in the parking lot for anybody who would like one or more to take with them when they leave this evening. We certainly would encourage that. There's 2 sides to this coin, and we feel like the only way our side's going to get out is by doing what you've done today and having these conversations and being able to provide information in a way that hopefully generates conversations like we're having. So, yes.
Appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. I'm glad to be able to do that. Any other questions of me? Let me finish, if it's okay, by saying this. And Ben is right. I've never been known to be at a loss of words, particularly something as passionate as public education as I am for it. I've done this for 30 years, as I stated at the beginning. There's a lot of things that school boards or superintendents or educators could make an effort at taking away from me, or maybe even arguably have taken away from me over the years. But the one thing they could never take away from me was my integrity. That's the one thing that I always brought to the table from the day I was hired to this day that was mine. And the only person that could give that away is me. And in those 30 years, I've never given it away. I am not about to give it away at this day and at this time, in this moment that's so crucial to the discourse and the direction of public education in our state and our country. So in saying that, what I'm saying to you is, I stand behind everything I've said here tonight, and I will be more than glad to have a discussion with anyone who sees it differently or has questions regarding it because they've heard it differently from others in other venues at another time earlier than tonight. But I promise you, the one thing I had when I came in, and the one thing I'm going to have when I leave, is my integrity. No one is taking that away from me. I thank you very much for your time. Ben, thank you so much. And again, we're here to answer any questions right up to the bitter end, to the last person. Thank you.
Well, I told Erwin I would speak, and my perspective is as a parent and elected official. And there's a few people in here that may or may not have voted for me, but I highly resent the fact that I had to work hard to be elected in order to make changes that I thought were beneficial for our school system. And to have the state and our legislature come and pretty much tell us by putting this on the ballot that our people here in Pickens County who are voters don't know what is right for their own children angers me, because I assure you, if they don't like what's happening in Pickens County, they will be calling any number of 5 of us and complaining about it. And if we don't make changes that they like, they will come and vote us out. And we won't have that opportunity if this passes. We will have people that are appointed. Our options will be to elect a new governor, to elect new people to our representatives and to our legislature. And like they said, it's a long process because it's an amendment to our Constitution. It's not just a law that passes. And I think that it infuriates me because I feel like that we're being disrespected because of what we're trying to do on our own local level. And we haven't had anybody come and petition for a charter school in Pickens County. We've talked about being a charter system and what we can do, and we're all on board for improving education here, and we personally know, we go in our schools, we have students in our schools, and we know what our kids need. And I resent that our legislature doesn't think that we know what our kids need. And so I'm sure I probably have lost a few Facebook friends, but I'm passionate about it, and I feel like that's the right thing to do. And I don't want the state to take away from what my children deserve for their education. And I feel like I know what's best for them. And I get involved, go to their schools and get involved. And that's what it means, and that's what people need to do. And I think that our legislature wants to take that right away from parents and start doing what they want to do, what they think is more important. So, and that's my 2 cents worth.
I have a question. I've heard a lot of rhetoric against this bill, or against this amendment, but I've yet to see somebody stand up for it. Are we going to be able to see somebody tonight for this? And if not, well, that's not the question I asked, but I'm more than welcome to stand up here and invite.
We did ask people from the legislature that voted to have this amendment to attend, and they chose not to come.
I understand, and I actually found out about this at the last minute. But if there's nobody else here, I would like to speak on behalf for this.
Stand to your feet, sir, and be recognized.
Well, if there's anybody else who wants to speak who has already been picked, let them go ahead.
You need to understand, we're not against charter schools.
But
We're against the legislature taking the authority away from the local citizens. And the thing that blows my mind about that is that the Republicans, whom many of the people I voted for, their stance has always been local control and less government. And this is completely against the foundation of what most people say that they believe that are elected to our legislature.
and see, we've talked about this.
We've had some interesting discussions.
And I actually find that this is very much a bipartisan issue. Oh, yeah. My name is actually Steve Paul, and I feel like I have a piece of this is because I'm not looking at this as a legislator, as an elected official. I'm looking at this as a broke college student. And the first, I remember taking out of my time to go down to the Capitol. And we've got some lobbyists here. We've got some great people who have done a lot of good things over a lot of good years. And they want to point out a lot of other things besides what this amendment, I feel, it truly does. This only allows the state to acknowledge the existence of a charter school. That's it. For the first time ever, now this is not the bill that I went down and fought for. I'll admit that. But I can say we are going in the right direction. If you look over the past, since 1964, since we've been throwing money out of federal money and dropping it down to a localized system, we've kept on feeding a monster that's not working. The definition of insanity is to do something over and over again and expect different results. Well, this changes the time. And finally, we have, if you look at, you mentioned the Louisiana example. Governor Jindal came out, and he said for the first time a 100% school voucher system. And they're seeing results for the first time ever. They're seeing higher standards of educational graduation rates. They're seeing higher SAT scores. Go down there and look. I mean, New Orleans is revived all of a sudden due to its ability to start from the ground up on its educational level. We have overcomplicated this issue and this conversation with things that aren't about education. When, again, we talk about the taxing problem, we talk about the bipartisan issues, we talk about the corporate profits all being involved, but we're not looking at the numbers. And talking about local control, I don't think it does that. It doesn't take away local control. In fact, I think it puts local control back into the hands of the parent. And a lot of you can shake your hands at me, and a lot of you can disagree with me. But the fact of the matter is the appeal process only is given to the citizens. It is up to the citizens to come to the school board. And yes, they can do this now. But who's going to vie for the citizens when the local school board says no? Because all of a sudden, they're having to take on more choice than they've ever had before. Offering choice equals freedom to me. I don't know about to you. And I don't see the big deal when I have a lot of teachers that I know right now and they're out of work. They're working second jobs or they're subbing at the school, but they're not getting the job that they deserve, a full-time teaching job. And they've been doing this for quite some time. I want to be able to say one day, you know what? Let's give you a job. How do we do that? We expand the market base. How do we expand the market base? We offer more choice. Whether that comes from a traditional public school or not, I don't care. That doesn't bother me. What matters is that the kids are getting the best education possible. No major study out there has ever shown that traditional public schools that actually have a better rate than other traditional schools or other choice schools, whether they be private, charter, what have you. We have some great traditional public schools, don't get me wrong. And I want to fight to keep those. And we can also talk about the fact that I believe that we're not weaning out the bad teachers. There are a lot of great teachers, and there's one back there who's taught me. But we need to make sure that there's accountability and there's a competition that's instilled within our community, within our education system. And it hasn't been like that.
But Stephen, I mean, honestly, the reason why we can't wean out bad teachers is because our legislature puts in place tenure so that we can't get rid of people. We have to go through all of these steps. They put all of these, they tie our hands behind our back. I mean, believe me, I have looked. If you can ask Dr. Desper about the things that we ask about, that we are trying to get to the nitty-gritty, but they're not helping us do away with the prohibitives that we have in order to make things better. So their solution is, you know, you make the comment that teachers are going to get paid, these other teachers who are unemployed are going to have a job. So what's going to happen when we have to cut the school budget to make up for that? There's going to be other teachers that we're going to have to lay off from the public school that will no longer have a job. And it won't necessarily be the teachers who are not performing.
You know,
because of what they've set up.
It's good that you mentioned that. In 1930, we had over 230,000 public schools. In 2004, we have 19,000. That might be our issue right there, the fact that we're not offering the choice that we once were.
They're not giving us the money to offer it.
Yeah.
First of all, being a former high school history and economics teacher, I just love that you're up here advocating for citizenship rights, and appreciate that. I have a lot of respect for you for doing that. One thing that I want to mention, though, don't forget all the research out there, in addition to the one you mentioned, Louisiana. There's a lot of research that shows that the voucher system does not work in education. So we're trying to implement a program that has no research that backs it up as far as educational research goes. And then one thing that I love that you're stressing the free enterprise and the capitalism part of your argument, but my concern is that don't you see the fundamental government problem that you're dealing with here? That, you know, if we're for the people and we're trying to do this local control, and you're giving the control and you're giving taxpayers money to the state, to me that's a very fundamental right they tell you you're denying.
And I faced the same issue at the very beginning. I did. I joined hands with an organization that just fought hard, and I put my time and effort and money. Nobody continued to pay me to do to go down to the Capitol and lobby right beside people who have been lobbying there for 30 years. Sorry, I think you said actually 20. Anyways.
It's not making the old money.
Yes, ma'am. But again, I think it goes back to ultimately it's up to the citizens to decide whether they want a charter school or not. And it's up to them to have the appeal process, not the school. And so if you have a panel of just a few, select few, who are telling the majority of citizens who have decided on a charter school that they're denied the right to have a charter school, well then all of a sudden you've got an issue right there. And so, to me, again, in reading the bill, it's fairly simple. The state's only saying that we acknowledge the existence of charter schools. Yes, sir.
If all schools would be on common ground, I don't have as much of a beef with this. But just as was stated before, that students in charter schools will get so much more money is completely unfair. That's no different than going back to the times of segregation when everything was supposed to be separate but equal, but black students got all of the handouts. It's the very same issue. And just because I have a student who lives in the west end of the county and lives in a single wide trailer, that doesn't mean that student is entitled to any less than somebody who lives inside Big Canoe.
Amen. Amen. You're exactly right.
But you know, the charter schools are not being put in place to take care of the 600 and something special ed kids I have too. I have one child, as we were talking earlier, that it costs the taxpayers of this county $125,000 a year to educate. Nobody's going to bring a charter school in to deal with the issues that we have to deal with as a public school. And I will disagree with you. There are studies out there that show that public schools actually score higher. We talked about earlier, 2011, public schools in Georgia, they had 73% mid-AYP, charter schools 70%. So there's still a lot of...
And I went back and actually looked at that stat that we talked about earlier, where the charter schools have denied apparently the right for the disabled. And if they're public, they can't deny. They cannot deny if they are a public charter school. And charter schools are public schools.
And yet, miraculously, state charter schools have a very, very small percentage of special needs children. I agree with you. Legally, they cannot. And I don't know how it happens, but it happens.
Well, maybe the ratio of the school itself, the ratio of us
If you check
having...
the demographics of those state charter schools, especially the bricks and mortar ones, you will find very few special needs.
Wouldn't that ratio be skewed by the fact that we don't have nearly enough choice, whether it be in charter schools or other
areas? Small school.
Do what?
You think they'd be running over there for the small school?
They usually are. Again, I go back to that statistic. When we had 200, I'll get to you in here in a second. We had 230,000 in 1930 public schools. And today we're only around 19.
How many school districts there were in 1930?
Do what?
You know how many school districts there were in 1930?
I think, but it's the schools. I'm looking, you're talking about the teachers that
Because
have,
districts consolidate.
but that's,
Building larger schools.
and that may be another issue for another day.
It would be very easy for me to create a charter school that would virtually eliminate the possibility of severely profound need students from being able to attend. And I can do that in a number of ways. And it is done in a number of ways. I'm not speaking hypothetically. These charters do exist. I can set up a charter school where certain hourly requirements are made of the parents, where you have to put in a certain amount of time contributing to the overall welfare of the school, whether it's in whatever capacity that it may be. But I'm a parent who has to work 2, maybe even 3 jobs in order to try to keep that single wide trailer and my family with a roof over their head. I don't have the hours to contribute to that school. My child can't go there. I'm eliminated. I can set up a charter where there's a certain amount of requirements relative to uniforms or the way in which the child dresses in order to be able to attend. Now, granted, we can always get grants, I guess we could call them, or assistance in some instances. But me as a parent, if I have a certain level of pride that goes beyond my allowing mine to ask for someone to pay for my child to have a uniform, I'm precluded from being able to attend that school. Now, I'm all done. I can also go so far as to set up my charter school in a gated community. Bobby Cox and a group of retired professional athletes and managers are building or planning or wanting to build a community, including a major baseball complex in Bartow County. Part of that is a group out of China wanting to pay for their school to be built in that community. That community is not going to be open to the public. That community is not going to have roads that come and go through it. There are going to be gates, and you get through those gates through certain ways. My child is going to be precluded from being able to attend that school because I can't transport them to that school because transportation is not a requirement that can be made of a state charter school. You cannot do that. You cannot require the school systems or the parents to have, well, you can require the parents, but not the school system to provide a bus. So, in all of those instances, there are ways for me to be able to preclude a certain segment of the education, or the children in the education community, from being able to attend. I will grant that there are exceptions the other way, but what I can tell you is those types of charters exist. Those type of charter schools behind gated communities, gates exist, and they do not open their gates to the community in general in which they reside, to the public school system in which they reside. But the people outside those gates, they get to pay their tax dollars for that school to exist, and for those children to attend there, and for the utilities to be paid, and for the teachers to be paid. And by the way, young man, so that you know when you're doing your research, look into it. I know you've done a lot. You're very well educated and passionate on your side of this issue. But no, the very teachers you're talking about that aren't employed right now that would love to have a job, in Florida, it's $14 an hour to be a teacher in many of those charter schools. Now, I'm here to tell you, as a citizen and as an individual as passionate as you are about those charter schools, those teachers aren't staying there. You're going to have no continuity because the first time Mr. Desper has an opening in his school system, they're coming to work here. Because the teachers here aren't paid $14 an hour, nor should they be paid $14 an hour if they're going to do the job that you want done for the citizens of this community. So, all said and done.
You made some valid points. And I went down to Perry this past, I've been there 2 weekends now. And I've talked to a lot of people. A lot of people with kids with IEPs. And there was a good majority of them who had no idea that we already have a voucher system set up for the kids with IEPs. That voucher system is working. And you can shake your head about it or not.
But how is it working if they don't know about it?
Well, it's worries that the message is not being sent out because I think we're protecting. Hang on a second, because I'm on track 100 miles an hour and I've got a lot of points, but I will get you to. The voucher systems, or the protection is coming from the jobs that we are trying to keep. It's protection of the money. I keep hearing this piece of the pie or this piece of the puzzle. Where do the kids get this piece? Where do the kids come in? That's my problem, is that I keep hearing this piece of that's missing. Or it's going to be taken away somehow.
Well, I can assure you as a parent being on the school board, I'm not trying to keep a piece of the pie for the teachers that we have employed. Yes, I want to employ good quality teachers because my child benefits from employing those good quality teachers.
Amen.
And keeping the money in the system.
No,
So no, I don't want to give away my tax dollars to a state charter school.
Let me just set another example, since we're picking on gated communities in here. I grew up in one, so yeah, I'm sure you enjoy that. But here's the thing. I was driving down near Roswell, Milton area not too long ago, and I look over and I see this humongous school. In fact, I knew it was a school. But the fact that I started doing the research, and I think it was a little over $200 million. $200 million that we're spending on this one school. Probably the stats will show you that in the other areas in Gwinnett County, North Fulton County, those areas are producing some very good school results. Pickens County just recently has started up their first private school. They're going from trailers. They have a plan one day to produce $1 million facility. Nothing to the 200 millions that they're spending in some of these schools. But they're starting out in trailers. They have a dream, but I think what we're missing here is the fact that it's not about this amendment. It's really about the money and about the scared tactics of possibly a voucher one day. And the stats will show, if you look at places like Finland, who have the highest education in the world, you look at other countries like that, you will find that those countries who are producing the better quality of education, on average, not on average, they all do. They all have some type of choice, much better than we do here. Finland has the best education right now.
Their students score one of the highest in their national assessments, if that's the measure, but Finland doesn't have vouchers.
Finland, and I'm not talking just in vouchers, I'm just talking in choice. There's a difference between the choice, the limited choice that we have here and in other countries, and a pure voucher system.
See, I see it totally different. The vouchers to me are a whole different issue than this amendment.
But a lot of the other. Again, and my time was that a lot of the people who stood up here talked about the amendment and they rolled into a voucher system and how bad it was. And then they started talking about the profits of Walmart and whatnot.
Excuse me, because I'm about to go watch the presidential debate and get McDonald's hamburger. But I'm just going to make a comment, and I'll tell you where I'm coming from on this. You know, a product of public schools. I taught, coached, administered in public and private schools for 10 years, and in the business community for 25 or so, a little longer. My wife retired 32 years, last 26 in Pickens. And I'm finishing up my second and last term in school board. I've been fortunate enough to be invited into some groups over the last several years where people were running for office. And these very 4 or 5 member groups on Saturday mornings when these folks ran for election. And they always told us that education was one of their top priorities. And these are people I've ran, I see at least 4 politicians in this room tonight who ran as Republicans. They ran, education's important, local choice is important, we need local control. I heard it a million times. Okay, good. We can continue to go on a conservative or a semi-conservative route. I feel betrayed today at what's going on in the legislature, in the governor's office and everywhere else, and they know that I've told them. I've met with them, I've had lunch with them, and I've told them, I feel that you betrayed us here. You cut us off at the pass here. And you're not even talking about it. You won't even make a public statement about it because you know you've done this. And most of the people aren't paying a lot of attention to it. You can tell by the crowd tonight. I mean, I'm a little disappointed that we don't have more teachers and administrators and parents and people here to hear about this tonight. But that being said, one of the points that I continue to hear about choice and this and that, maybe folks need to understand that if the school board of Pickens County decided to approve a charter school tonight, built it in 6 months and it was sitting over across the road, people have a misconception, I think, that their children can automatically, if I don't like that math teacher in 7th grade, my kid can run over to the charter school. If my facts are correct, the only way that you can get in those is a lottery system or some other type of system to do that. It's not a panacea to move everybody. But I grew up in Alabama in public school in the 60s, and I saw desegregation. I saw segregation and desegregation. And while this is a much different type of issue, I'm not trying to compare the two, but I think we're headed down that road. And it may be financial, it may just be the segregation of the lucky and the draw. I don't know. But I'm real concerned as a taxpayer, personally, and as a business that pays a lot of taxes, I'm personally concerned about what this is going to do to our tax base. And we talked about for several years on the school board how the state and local funding is flip-flopped in terms of what we're getting from the state. Dr. Desper talked about the $17 million or some dollars that we've lost in austerity cuts. If we can't fund one school system, how are we going to fund two? I don't understand that. And it looks to me like if we're going to split the money up, even though one gets more than the other, we're still going to be hurting everybody. And what we need to be doing is taking that money we're going to spend on charter schools, increase the funding for public education, hold people accountable. And the parents will do that. And I'm going to stop there because I'm about to leave and I'm not walking just having
I understand.
I want to say, Urban, I appreciate the fact that you pulled this together here. And I wish there had been more people here, but you did a good job pulling this together. And I'm going to go get a hamburger and watch the debate, and I hope that Mitt does well. But I got to thank you.
Thank you.
See y'all
And
later.
real quick, to those that thought that he mentioned, we already have in place the funding to protect the traditional public schools. House Bill, I believe, House Bill 979 does exactly that. It instills that the money that's already there for traditional public schools, and I'll be telling you here, instills in public schools is not transferred unless you can come up and be able to share the revenue. In other words, they're not going to cut public schools, public traditional schools, without making sure that the funding's there for the charter schools.
They already are, Stephen. We just had to come up with $750,000. So they already are
The
cutting.
past 10 years, yes, education has been cut, but since 1964, it has not. Yes, sir.
Let's back it up, because they're actually, you just triggered the third thing that was in my head. And that has to do with what you just said about the bill and the funding of public education in our state. I had heard you touching on it, and you didn't quite get there when I was here, when I got here, so I didn't know if you had before. You are right in terms of your perception and your understanding of what that legislation, the enabling legislation, is intended to do, or is supposed to be intended to do, relative to the amendment if the Constitution changed. What's missing in what you're presenting is that right now there's a commission at the state level that is meeting, and its sole purpose is to determine what, in fact, is adequate funding for public education in our state. Because we attend those hearings, and because we've been there to listen to the discussions that have taken place, we have heard the panelists of that commission telling legislators who come before them, legislators who are connected to that commission, telling legislators who come before them that what they want to see and what legislators are wanting or are saying to them is adequate funding for public education in the state of Georgia is that will be defined as being at the level where it is now. So the law, the Enabling Act, the bill you're talking about, the legislation that you're absolutely correct in terms of its language, will not be violated. Because we can say, we didn't cut public education, we didn't cut the funding for public education in Pickens County. They're getting exactly the same amount of money they got in the fiscal year 2012 or 2013, whichever one we're in then. That's what's going on right now. That's the shell game that's being played with the public in this state relative to what's underlying and driving this entire amendment. It's not vouchers. That never came out of my mouth. I don't think if they ran the tape back, they'd ever hear that word came out of my mouth. Because it's not about that. This is about for-profit companies seeing an opportunity to be able to come into our state in a way they can't in any other state and be able to make millions upon millions of dollars, tax dollars, on our children. And you're absolutely right about the legislation's language. But again, what's missing is the fact that that commission is pushing the legislature to agree to adequate funding for Pickens County and every other school system in our state, public school system in our state, to be predicated upon a $5 billion cut that has taken place since 2003, $4 billion of which has taken place since 2008. And those are rounded figures on my part, but they're really right there in the ballpark for both of those. That's what they want to do. That's why when Ben says you'll never see those dollars again, if they get away with adequately funding public education at 2012 levels, yeah, we got to fight. I'm not ready to acquiesce those monies at this point yet, but the legislature is prepared to do so if they can get their collective body to agree to it.
That's what I've read and heard. I believe that is very much a flexible bill as far as money goes. But let me say one last thing. Let me say one last thing. If you're looking for an example of choice, look no further than the differences between our K through 12 level and our colleges. If you go anywhere, I've been all around the world and I've spoken to individual shop owners, I've spoken to moms, dads, and they'll tell you, why send my child to America for their K through 12 system? It's the colleges that matter. Why do our colleges thrive and continue to thrive? And they are the one type of education that foreigners and everybody else around the world comes to. It's because of choice. We have the choice. We have the choice to choose our colleges. They have the choice to deny us. Yeah, sure. But it is our choice to handpick our style of colleges. You can shake your head all you want to, but the fact of the matter is our colleges have a lot more choice than do our K through 12. And with that, I'll finish and we can talk afterwards. No, you're not going to cut me off.
I do have one last question. Do you have any idea how much these people that are appointed to this commission are going to get paid every year?
No, but do you realize how much these two individuals get paid?
Do you know how much I get paid every year?
I hear that. I understand that.
I think there's a better way to ask that question. How much will they be paying the politicians so they can sit on that commission in order to make those decisions?
And how much do we pay the lobbyists and teachers unions to come down here and talk about this today? And have the guy who's spending his hard-earned money, who's the broke college student, having to fight these?
You didn't pay me anything on that.
I understand that, but you also work for a pretty penny when you go down to the lobby, when you go down to the state capitol.
We did not.
I have many duties that month.
We did not have sweater vests in my day, but I spent many an hour in front of many a group in my day, in your shoes, having my discussions about what I thought public education needed and was about and needed and it should occur in the 60s, well actually 70s, and then I was hired into this in the 80s. So I've been where you are. Don't make the mistake that I haven't and I wasn't paid when I did it. I'm being paid for it now. Yes, that's true. I am a full-time staff person for GAE. I'm not a lobbyist for them. I'm a full-time staff person for them. And this is my area of the state. So yes, I do speak up for it. I believe passionately in public education. I believe passionately in what these individuals do. I know the blood is up. They didn't know what they were getting into when they ran for these board positions. They didn't realize what all was involved in it until they got in it. But I know the blood and the sweat they pour out for it. And I know what we can do if we come together instead of allowing ourselves to be divided. And that's what this amendment will do to us as a state. It will be too late when our eyes are open. It will be too late to go back and say, oops, we made a mistake, because it's codified in our Constitution. If this was a law that we were fighting over, I would say, young man, let's have this discussion, let's have this banter, let's see how it plays out, and then we come back and review it again. But that's not what we're facing. We're facing an amendment to our Constitution that will codify in stone for generations to come something that is not in the best interest of the whole. And public education is for the whole, not for the part. And that's part of this conversation as well. Thank you, and I'll be glad to talk with you later.
Yeah,
Love
we'll finish the discussion later, but I appreciate them. And a lot of what you just said, I'm going to fight tooth and toenail for my teachers to be able to be unleashed in their educational style. And you're right, they do a damn good job, excuse my language. But they do. They go above and beyond the call of duty.
So you can get away with that because you're young and using it. I used to get away with it when I was young too, using it, and now I have to be careful myself.
Well, here nor there, so I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate everyone that's come tonight, the different views, the information that's been here. I know there were scarce probably here in the meeting room, but thanks to these two good ladies over here that'll go out to the people of the county. I hope they will take what's been said here tonight and consider it for the vote. There's a few things that I'll listen carefully to. And some people in this room were just small back in 1992 when we voted, gave our right away to vote for our superintendent. This is pretty much like that was then. Hardly anybody knew about it. It was slipped in on us. This amendment is more or less being slipped in on us, just as that amendment was back in its day. The Georgia Constitution says the state of Georgia shall provide education for our students, a public education, where everybody can be involved, public. Well, they stuck a word in to the amendment, and I was hoping somebody would pull it out tonight, and they haven't, but they stuck the word public into this amendment to make people think they're going to have a voice once this thing passes. You plainly heard this commission is already set in place, as Angela said, kick it off in March. You know, it's a done deal. They're just waiting November the 6th for the trigger to be pulled where they can get to work on November the 7th. I had a good talk with our representative last Friday. invited him to be here tonight. Obviously, he either had other obligations or just simply chose not to come, whichever. But if this amendment was so doggone important to the state of Georgia, why did they not hold public meetings such as this to discuss it with their constituents, both senators and representatives, to find out what the people of Georgia wanted, not what the lobbyists and the private for-profit people wanted? They whined and dined them. You've had your chance. It's my floor.
Yes, sir.
Just have to keep your cool. Stop and think about this, folks. I'm tired of people hoodwinking us. We've been robbed by the state of Georgia to the tune of $17.5 million by the state of Georgia in 10 years. I love waking night, just as Dr. Desper does, just as these other board members have and will, worrying about how are we going to meet these budgets. Then you got a little group comes over here, get a whole lot more money than we get. Georgia, as well as Pickens County, needs to wake up and realize they've drank the Kool-Aid. I didn't drink it. I'm not going to drink it. I despise them for it. They're taking away from my grandchildren, they're taking away from your children, your grandchildren, under the guise of a state charter school system. Taking, as you've already heard here tonight, I've got a world of information of my own that I've had research on, where our tax dollars go for private concerns to boost their profits. Alec, I found something in researching them not too long ago, scared me to death. They have more than 25,000 lawyers in Alec. Can you imagine what happens if you get 25,000 lawyers together? People, it's time to wake up. I know this young man has got his ideas, and that's his right. But bottom line, when you take away from the little children here in Pickens County to give to some foreign country that's going to be over in Bartow County, something's bad wrong. Our legislators knew better than this. I don't care if in 2 years we vote every one of them out. I can tell you that. But this has been very upsetting to me for a long time. I love Pickens County. I love our school system. I love our people here. Just as I'm sure every county in the state of Georgia, they love their schools. They love their children. You don't believe we love our children? Be over here on the football field and cry tonight. You see what it's about. Be at the middle school football fields and see what it's about. And if you think our schools are failing here in Pickens County, look at our test scores. Look at our absentee rates. Look at our dropout rates. Look at our AYP rates. There's measures. This fellow just almost said that we were all failing. He didn't quite use those words, but I believe he was short of it. When you take the best deal going and you do away with it, you have folded your hands and said, our students are not worth it. And that's my feeling on it. I know there's a lot of times that I may just say more than I should say. I'm going to go ahead and spit it out there. We saw it last week. Ben and I talked about it. how the governor on state time, state automobiles and all that, went to the State Chamber of Commerce and was promoting the state charter schools. But on the other hand, Dr. Barge was told he better keep his mouth shut or you're going to be in trouble. I'm not worried about them. I'm not afraid of them. I put this meeting together. I did it myself. The school board was not involved. I want that clearly understood. But I would hope that if we as a school board had decided to do it, we would have done it. And I believe we would have. I've never been really one to fear a man. I voted for Sam Mullins. I think he's read things wrong. I think our governor's wrong. And I'm not afraid to tell it. But we've got to continue to support public education in Georgia and people like Angela Palm that's at the legislature, Fred, that keep us informed. I appreciate them from the bottom of my heart. They do a great job. They're not lobbyists. They want us to know the truth. Appreciate everyone that's come tonight. Does anybody want to, excuse my voice, I've had sinuses pretty bad. Anybody else before we leave?
Hold on a second.
You had your shot.
Well, wait. I feel that there's a whole majority in here that's against this bill, and to have one person, and I gave plenty of feedback to those as well, so I don't believe that time counts. But I do believe, y'all guys can laugh all you want. By the way, this lady is a lobbyist.
No, she isn't.
Okay.
Well,
okay.
You're the only lobbyist that gives the truth.
Okay, and another thing, I don't think that we should define this entire school system by a football game. I think the reading, writing, and arithmetic, we need to be looking at a lot more than the community going to
where you can better understand it. Those same people you'll see at the football game support our school system, right down to the individual teacher, the parapro, the custodian. I don't judge our system by the foot size of people at football field. But I said, if you don't believe we support education in Pickens County, you go up there and look.
What does football have to do with supporting education?
Because those same people are the parents of our students, and they support our school system to a T.
And I can tell you right now, with a lot of teachers in here, they can tell you that a lot of parents aren't involved.
If a parent isn't involved, it's that parent's fault because the doors of every school in this system aren't open.
And that's another conversation for another day.
Dr. Lemieux, am I telling it straight?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in excellence in the 3 A's, academics, athletics, and the arts, and that's what public schools are all about.
And I would be in agreement that their athletics plays a huge part in that.
And through the participation of parents, teachers, and administration, what is the title of your school?
With the Georgia Lighthouse School to watch. So, I mean, all the schools, every one of these schools has some tremendous things they can be proud of. It's a distinguished Title I school, you know, or whether it's a Platinum Award school or a Gold Award school. So all these schools here are award-winning schools. But, you know, like I said, I appreciate that you did this. I'm sure at Easterwood, and thank you so much.
We can talk for a few minutes after we need to adjourn. They've got